So I'm Nick Shepherd. I'm Open Research Advisor based in the Research Services team in the library here at the University of Leeds. I'm also one of the senior leads for the Knowledge Equity Network. We'll introduce shortly our guest speakers for today, Monica Granados and Tatiana Belata. But first of all, I'll give you a little bit of a context around today. So this is a Knowledge Equity Network event in collaboration with what we call Open Lunch, these are a regular series of webinars we run out of the library. So I work with a colleague from the Knowledge Equity Network, Tom Freeth, on this. So thanks, Tom. I know you're online. And unlike Tom and I always think our colours don't quite work together. So the orange and the blue of Ken and Open Lunch don't quite work together. But in any case, this is the running order today. So a little bit of an introduction from myself. Before we hear from Monica and from Tatiana, and I also want to leave plenty of time for questions and answers and a bit of an open discussion. So please do feel free to post any questions in the chat as we go. To start with a little bit of a sort of background about the Knowledge Equity Network. So it was launched in April 2023. Around the principles set out in the Declaration of Knowledge Equity, which you can find online. I'm sure Tom or Antonio will post a link to that in a moment, and there is a QR code for it in a moment. So those principles essentially are universal, collaborative, inclusive, and sustainable. So it was set up to connect and to progress the cause of knowledge equity, which includes open research, which is the area that I tend to focus on, open education, which tends to be perhaps more Antonio's area, for example, and looks across higher education, the higher education ecology, to identify challenges, barriers, and solutions which will enable us to challenge the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. So it was co-founded, as I say, in 2023 by the University of Leeds and by the University of Pretoria. But we now have signatories from 67 countries across the globe, including 27 higher education institutions, as well as lots of individual signatories as well. So if you haven't already, please do read the declaration and sign up to it if you agree with the principles it outlines. Just to flag as well, as I say, my role in the library, I've highlighted there the Knowledge for All Library's vision for 2030, and that covers many of the similar areas and sort of aspirations as the Knowledge Equity Network, as I'm sure many other colleagues from other libraries may do as well. So I think we're potentially quite familiar with many of the issues around knowledge equity that I've just highlighted a few there. I won't go into that in too much detail today, but certainly one of the areas that I've certainly become very interested in being able to tackle that is Wikimedia. So we do have, as I say, two speakers today. The first speaker, Monica, will be speaking first from Creative Commons, and the Creative Commons licensing colleagues will be very familiar with in the context of open research and open education, and also those licenses in themselves facilitate much of the work that Wikimedia does. And Wikimedia UK, which is the sort of UK-based chapter of the Global Wikimedia Foundation, was actually an early partner in the Knowledge Equity Network, and did in fact help us to develop the declaration. They did input to that declaration in the very early days. And just to highlight really, I certainly wasn't aware of the broader Wikimedia ecosystem before I started looking at it in more detail. Everybody's familiar, of course, with Wikipedia as the encyclopedia that everyone can edit. But there's actually lots and lots of different projects in the infrastructure, 17, I think, at the last count, things like Wikimedia Commons and Wikidata and Wikisource, some of which Tatiana may touch on today, but it's worth exploring if you're interested. And obviously there's a global community as well, working in well over 300 different language wiki communities across the globe, English Wikipedia being the largest, but by no means the only Wikipedia community out there. So Tatiana and myself are certainly advocates for the potential for universities to engage strategically in the areas of things like information literacy, research impact. So you can, share in openly licensed text and images to improve Wikipedia, for example, or linking Wikipedia citations to open access repositories are just a couple of examples of the types of things that you can do. And obviously there's a synergy with the declaration, the Ken Declaration, and the mission of the Wikimedia Foundation itself over there on the right-hand side, who explicitly talk about knowledge equity with a mission to set knowledge free to ensure that everyone everywhere has equitable access to create and consume information. And with that in mind, and with that potential for universities, we have recently at Leeds appointed a Wikimedia and open knowledge advisor of our own. I know that's a colleague, Lucy Hinney, who can't be here today, but that's a similar role in some respects to Tatiana that she's going to tell us about today. So just before I do hand over to our speakers, I just wanted to highlight, I thought this was quite a timely and interesting example that colleagues may have seen doing the rounds on social media over the past few days. So this on the right-hand side is a post on Blue Sky. I, like many others, have abandoned X, as was Twitter, which tends to be a challenging environment these days. But this is a post on Blue Sky subtweeting an MD, no less. So someone who's claiming that the climate scam is over based on an article that was co-written with Grok, which is the AI tool for X or Twitter, as the primary author. And that has been published as this. So full disclosure, I haven't had a chance myself to explore this in any great detail, but he's making the point that, this is the sort of battlefield of sort of information that we're in at the moment. In the context of that, I just wanted to highlight some correspondence that Tatiana had recently published, along with Declan Finney, who's a colleague of ours here at Leeds in the School of Earth and Environment, in Nature, correspondence called "For More Reliable AI, Academics Should Edit Wikipedia," where they're making the point that Wikipedia is a fundamental training and reference data set for large language models, LLMs as they're called, which I think Grok is an example, and that there's a greater need than ever for everyone to contribute to an accurate, reliable and robust Wikipedia. And as I say, I can't claim to know the full story behind this AI-generated paper that claims to discredit the consensus on climate change. But one of the alleged co-authors, that's an entry from his Wikipedia article, properly cited two reliable sources, as is the principle of Wikipedia, that suggests that he's a anthropogenic climate change denier, but is frequently cited by governments to back up their positions of anti-climate science, etc. So I just thought that was an interesting sort of timely example in the context of what we're talking about today. But with that, I'll just quickly highlight another couple of upcoming events. If you're interested, there are a couple of QR codes there. I will post the links in the chat as well. That are coming up on Tuesday, the 1st of April and Wednesday, the 23rd of April. So there's more information about those online if you would like to join us for those events in the future. So with that, I shall stop sharing my slides if I can figure it out. Hang on. Zoom always confuses me. And I shall introduce Monica. So if you're ready to share your slides, Monica. So this is very pleased to welcome Dr. Monica Granados. She's the Director of Open Science at Creative Commons. And I believe you previously worked on open knowledge initiatives with Mozilla Pre-Review, who I confess I'm not familiar with, Monica, and the Government of Canada. So thank you very much for joining us today, and very interested to hear about some of your work with Creative Commons and climate.
Thanks so much, and thank you for the introduction, Nick. Really what I want to do today is set the scene for why we should contribute to the global commons. And later you'll hear from Tatiana why having things in the commons is important and what it enables. So I am Monica Granados from Creative Commons, and Creative Commons is an organization that empowers people to grow and sustain the thriving commons of shared knowledge and culture. So what does that mean? We want folks to contribute creations, whether that's art or music or sound, or peer-reviewed literature and peer-reviewed data, to a commons that everyone can access. What Creative Commons really was built around is to give a legal infrastructure for creators, whether that's artists or musicians or knowledge producers like scientists, to be able to share their creation, their knowledge, and have a legal infrastructure to share that creation knowledge so that we can address the world's most pressing challenges and create a brighter future for all. So the licenses are all built around copyright and intellectual property. When Creative Commons was founded, it was really the notion of co-opting copyright. You know, copyright was originally a mechanism to protect creators, but increasingly, as copyright became bigger and bigger, it was a way to enclose creations and knowledge. So copyright is really the area of law that determines how you can access original works of creators. That includes researchers who author manuscripts and research papers. But, you know, in a culture or an environment where we don't want to enclose information, there needs to be a mechanism that works on top of copyright to allow us to share and open up those creation, that knowledge. And that's where the licenses come in. The copyright enables creators to have ownership of manuscripts, data, or in some cases, data, illustrations. But the licenses is the infrastructure that works on top of copyright to allow creators to openly share those creations. We have a suite of licenses that move from less restrictive to more restrictive. At Creative Commons, particularly for scientific works, we recommend our CC BY license. So what that does, if you are the copyright holder, the author of, say, a scientific manuscript, and you want others to use your work freely without having to come and ask you for permission, a license, a CC BY license, basically is a flag that you put on your work that says you can remix and reuse, translate, take pieces of this work and make it your own, as long as you give attribution of the original source so that you remixed that creation. There are other qualifiers that you can put in for more restrictive licenses. Really, the idea there is that we want to empower creators to openly share their material, but also have choice and control of how they want their work to be shared. So having that as a basis, having copyright and the licenses that allow us to open up enclosed knowledge, how can we take the licenses and help us tackle some of the world's greatest challenges, like climate? So at Creative Commons, we are working specifically on open climate initiatives, because we believe that knowledge is a public good and a human right. That if we have access to the world's knowledge, we can tackle the world's greatest problems, including climate change. By leveraging the licenses, we can grow the commons. And if we can grow the commons, the answers to the world's greatest problems, like climate change, like how we mitigate climate change, how we solve climate change, how we make decisions based on the impacts of climate change, will be in the commons and will be able to be mobilized, not only for solutions, but for other applications like the ones you'll hear about later today. So what does the access to climate knowledge, or at least a piece of it, look like right now? We've done some work with the Curtin Open Knowledge Initiative and looked at all the papers that have an association with climate change. So we've got this big corpus of papers. We used search terms around climate change, and that netted us about 500,000 outputs from 1979 to 2023. And really the big picture here is that only about 50% of research papers that are published on climate change are open. So that means that if you are looking for an answer around, whether a protected species might be in a habitat that will be developed, or you're interested in the diversity of a specific stand of trees, and that knowledge is in a paper, you almost just have a 50% chance of being able to access that knowledge if you're not part of an academic system that pays the subscriptions to access those journals. We think that needs to be changed. We think we can leverage the licenses, we can help others leverage the license to grow the commons, to move the needle towards more open access and openly licensed content. So we've got two projects that I want to talk to you briefly about. The first is the Paper Pledge for the Planet. What this is an initiative where we are working with the Confederation of Open Access Repositories and EIFL to work with repositories around the world and give them data on papers that can be deposited as author-accepted manuscripts into repositories with an open license, so that these articles that are paywalled can be opened up through the green open access route. So what we do is that we work with this network, we give them a list of papers, information about like the title and the author, what journal it was published in, so that we know the type of license that can be put on the author accepted manuscript. If you're unaware of what that means, that is the version of the manuscript that's been peer reviewed. All it's missing is the formatting from the journal version of record. And so basically we leverage this repository network to go out and directly appeal to the researchers, the authors of these papers, and say, send us your author accepted manuscript or deposit your author accepted manuscript. You have produced incredible knowledge about climate change. It's currently behind a paywall. If you deposit an author accepted manuscript, you're going to free up that knowledge. You'll contribute to the commons. And if you put an open license on it, then it can be remixed, reused, translated. If you're a researcher, you can do it yourself as well. You can leverage the Share Your Paper tool by OAWorks. What you can do is go in and to the website, it's just shareyourpaper.org. You insert the DOI of the version of record, and it will give you information about what version can be deposited, under what conditions and license, and you can actually even upload it directly. So if you have the author accepted manuscript of your paper, you can upload it directly to Share Your Paper, and now that information is free. We're also doing an unbinding project, and what we mean by unbinding is, again, we want to free up climate change research. And more importantly, there's even specific papers that we definitely want to make sure that those are opened up as quickly as possible. The IPCC report has about 40,000 citations. Those are 40,000 important climate change papers that have been selected by a panel of experts, of researchers who have said, this is the most important research on climate change. That research gets mobilized into reports that go to policymakers, but that doesn't mean that those papers are open. About 40% of those papers actually are still behind a paywall as well. And what we're doing there is appealing directly to publishers. We've given them, sort of their tranche of that corpus, said, you have published this number of papers that are cited in the IPCC report. Can you open up those papers? It's of vital importance that that information is open so that it can be mobilized. Ideally, you also put a CC license on that paper so that we can grow the commons and have the information to tackle the impacts of climate change and move towards mitigation, adaptations, and solutions. We also are working with climate data, not just publications. We've been working with some of the largest holders of climate data to facilitate the sharing of that data amongst their community, so that they adopt CC licenses, have consistent and harmonized metadata, and database user interface practices. So if we've worked with organizations like the World Meteorological Association, the Group on Earth Observations, to CC license the data, so that, again, it's putting a flag on that data so that it's easier to share and to reuse this critical data on climate change. So what I want to leave you with here is, I hope you have an understanding of why licenses are incredibly important, why we need to move beyond just being able to be free to read. These licenses allow us to contribute to a commons that can be remixed, reused, translated, mobilized into resources, into teaching resources, into open educational resources, and make it easier for the world to understand climate change and facilitate uses like Wikipedia.
Thank you very much, Monica. That was really interesting, and some of the stuff that I'm aware of already. But and in terms of Creative Commons, but I'm always interested to the extent that colleagues are aware of it. So our data repository, it's our default license, Creative Commons. Increasingly, research is under Creative Commons. But just one point I think to emphasise is that I think certainly used to confuse me and confuses some colleagues that I speak to. It doesn't affect copyright, does it? You retain the copyright when you put it under an open license.
That's right. That's right. And only if you hold the copyright can you put a license on it. And so they really work in tandem. We do have a public domain dedication. So like you can sort of give over the copyright to the public domain. That's our CC0 public domain dedication. But again, in line with the culture of sharing in knowledge production, we always recommend a CC BY license that is sort of the equivalent of a citation. You hold on to that copyright. We always advocate that knowledge producers hold on to their copyright because it empowers them to then license their material.
Yeah, no, thank you. I will pass on to Tatiana now, although maybe if we've got time, and I don't think there's any questions yet, but colleagues, please do post any questions as we go. But I suppose I'm interested in maybe some of the tension around AI. We've already mentioned artificial intelligence and actual that, not potentially giving
I'd love to talk about that
attribution. So that's maybe something we could come to. But first of all, we'll hear from Tatiana. So Tatiana is a South African environmental science communicator and writer. She's currently Wikimedia Visiting Fellow at the Global Systems Institute at the University of Exeter, where she collaborates with researchers and students to improve the accessibility and quality of climate change information on Wikipedia while addressing climate mis and disinformation. So thanks to Tatiana, and pass over to you.
Thank you. Please do let me know if my slides are not showing. So I am here to get you thinking a bit about using Wikipedia to create and share knowledge openly. My name is Tatiana Belletta. I am an environmental conservation researcher and also a science communicator. And I am the Wikimedian in residence at the Global Systems Institute. Nick just gave a really great explanation about what that is, but I am essentially an in-house Wikipedian who is there to assist the Global Systems Institute and the University of Exeter and any other researchers beyond that university as well that are interested in updating and improving climate change information on Wikipedia. So the GSI does a whole range of incredible climate change research. They lead a lot of work around climate tipping points, for example. So what this actually looks like is, for example, I host events where I teach people how to edit Wikipedia. You can see some on the left here. These are called editathons. I also work directly with researchers and experts to review content on Wikipedia and improve it. And also I support researchers and institutes to openly license their research and also their media, so their infographics and graphs, so that we can upload that onto Wikipedia. I am sure we all know what Wikipedia is. I'm sure quite a few of us have probably used it today. So it is often called the encyclopedia anyone can edit. Um, it's a multilingual free online encyclopedia, so over 300 different languages, and it is open source. So all the information that gets put on there is open source. It's maintained by a community of volunteers through open collaboration, which we'll talk a bit about more. But in some ways makes Wikipedia quite a unique space on the internet. It's read 15 billion times a month. And it's also one of the top visited websites in the world still. And I think it's one of the only non-profit websites that's been in the top 10 sites in the world. It also powers smart speakers like Alexa, Google searches, large language models as well. So this is all really to say that a lot of people read Wikipedia and engage with Wikipedia's content. So a core rationale behind the work that I do is that when we edit Wikipedia, we're putting information on a platform where people can access it. And as Monica mentioned earlier as well, we have the same goal. That means that more people can make more informed decisions on important issues such as climate change. Wikipedia has been really impactful in quite a number of different ways. So during the coronavirus pandemic, there were a group of experts and volunteers who were working quite tirelessly on the Wikipedia articles around the topics of coronavirus, pandemics, and vaccination that actually created a space where Wikipedia was one of the like most up-to-date resources around COVID. And I think that's also one of the strengths of Wikipedia is that people can respond very quickly around in real time. So as things were changing and shifting all the time with the COVID pandemic, and as misinformation was spread, there were experts that were on Wikipedia trying to keep things current in a changing environment. There's been quite a shifting tide in terms of how people trust Wikipedia. More and more people have trusted Wikipedia more over the last few decades. And everyone from researchers to legal judges to policymakers is using and engaging with Wikipedia. As Nick mentioned, the Wikimedia Foundation, which hosts Wikipedia, has open knowledge as a core facet of their work and of Wikipedia itself. They also acknowledge that there are a lot of power dynamics around knowledge, and that Wikipedia, given the fact that it is an open collaborative space, is a platform where people can work to add historically marginalized groups' histories and knowledges onto the platform. That being said, Wikipedia does still suffer from systemic bias. So this is the picture of the average Wikipedian. There are a lot of programs to diversify the knowledge base, but I would say like English Wikipedia can be much more Western-centric. But the good news is that because it is a collaborative space and people can edit, you can contribute to this. So people can go and add more information, broadening perspectives, broadening the representation around the knowledge systems there and the different contexts. There's been a lot of discussion around why researchers should be contributing to Wikipedia, although not enough discussion, I think. This is particularly interesting and relevant for like the work that I do, because the scientific process does not easily accommodate people outside of academia. Information can get paywalled, but it also is inaccessible in the sense that it is written in academic jargon, which not everyone understands. And so Wikipedia provides an incredible role here where translating that information into accessible language that is readily available to a lay audience is immensely important. Please do scan this QR code to get the open access version of this article. But because LLMs are using Wikipedia as a core facet of their training data, Wikipedia is becoming important in that sense as well, as we are seeing these knowledge systems shift, the rise of AI mediated content, the rise of ChatGPT and other platforms to actually search and find and curate content for consumption. When they're drawing, the fact that they're drawing on Wikipedia means that there is still an important role here for human mediated content. Something that I'm also very interested in is how we can use Wikipedia to counter mis- and disinformation narratives. So with the rise of social media, the pace and speed which information is shared is much, much faster. And so mis- and disinformation can spread like wildfire. Here are some examples. And I want to talk about one instance where we were able to counter some of this with Wikipedia. In April 2024, last year, there was a massive storm that hit the United Arab Emirates and caused very significant flooding. And I noticed that on social media platforms, there was a very strong narrative around cloud seeding causing the storm. So that is cloud seeding is a form of climate engineering to induce rainfall. And the UAE does conduct cloud seeding activities, but in this instance, there was no cloud seeding activities undertaken, and this was actually a storm that was very clearly modeled. You can see it like moving into the country, and that experts were basically in consensus that this was a storm that had been exacerbated due to anthropogenic climate change, coupled with the fact that the UAE does not have proper drainage infrastructure to deal with these kinds of extreme weather events. So I saw that as people were encountering these narratives on social media platforms, they were actually migrating to Wikipedia to verify them, to make sense of them. This article got 190,000 views in April, and which I think was about a 90-something% increase. The article on cloud seeding was viewed 600,000 times in April as well. So there wasn't any. In fact, there was not a very clear, some very sort of suspicious information here around the emphasis and the weighting around cloud seeding. But I basically was able to add some information around flooding and the April floods, which was also based on some other work that some other editors had done. So now the people that were trying to make sense of this information could go onto this page and get a much more accurate understanding of what the scientific consensus was. And I'm not the only person who's doing this kind of stuff. Wikipedia is a community of editors, and there is a climate change community that really dedicates their time to maintaining the knowledge on Wikipedia around climate change, which is pretty inspirational. And you could be one of these people too. So just to close, I wanted to go over a few myths or misconceptions that I've encountered as I've worked with researchers and students on Wikipedia and climate change. Wikipedia is by no means a perfect system, but I find that a lot of people's perceptions of it are quite outdated. So a lot of the time people feel that because anyone can edit Wikipedia, you can kind of put anything up there and it will just stay there, and that therefore Wikipedia is not trustable at all. Wikipedia's got very solid guidelines and rules around sourcing. So if you put a statement on Wikipedia, you need to cite the source of the information. And if you do not, or if you see that other people have not put a reliable source, then you can remove that information. Wikipedia also has a neutral point of view mandate. So you need to discuss things neutrally. And minority points of view need to be presented as such, and majority points of view need to be presented as such. Another myth was that no one really looks or reviews the content that gets put up on Wikipedia. And while Wikipedia doesn't have a peer review process in the same way that publishing a paper would, there is actually quite a lot going on where people are engaging with the content and checking through it. So Wikipedia does have a combination of machine learning tools and also quite rigorous human oversight as well from volunteer editors. So there are algorithms and filters that detect things like vandalism. But again, there is this community of people that are watching articles and will look to see what new edits have come in and to see if they are accurate as well. Another thing I hear is that there's a bit of an idea that if you could kind of spend a lot of time working on Wikipedia and making great edits, but then if some vandal comes along and gets rid of them, they're kind of gone forever, and that work is over, and you've wasted your time. But Wikipedia keeps a record. This is publicly available. You can see this on any article. A list of all the edits that have been made to that article. And so it actually means it's really easy to restore edits if there has been vandalism. You do usually need to go through a process of like calling attention to it if it's sort of the reversion continues. But those edits will not last. In fact, the climate change, the cloud seeding article that I referenced earlier, I had some pushback from some pretty bad faith actors that were anonymous IP addresses that didn't like the climate change discussion. But after a bit of working on that, that information is now still up there. So that was an instance where there was some bad faith actors and it was easily resolved. Also worth mentioning is that there are quite a few articles that are considered controversial in the sense that they attract a lot of attention in terms of editing that get a protection lock. So the climate change article has a little lock on it, which means that there are different kinds of locks, but you need to have an account to edit it. Your account needs to be a certain age, as in it has to have existed for a month, for example, and you need to have made a few edits. So these are the systems that are in place to basically stronghold Wikipedia. So I find that a lot of people don't know about these systems and these structures that are in place, and so sometimes view Wikipedia as quite like a lawless space, but there is actually quite a lot going on behind the scenes as well. Let alone the fact that I haven't discussed, but you can see on the top left-hand side next to article, it says talk, and that's actually a page where editors can message each other and collaborate on articles as well. So there really is that community space to engage with other editors. So I guess I'd ask, why aren't you editing Wikipedia? I'd really encourage you to make your research open access, to also extend that to your imagery, graphs, and infographics. We're always looking for those to put up onto Wikipedia. Visual learning is so important. You can learn how to edit Wikipedia through online resources, or you can join an editathon. You're also more than welcome to email me if you'd like to learn or contribute anything that you might have seen on Wikipedia that you think should change. You might also consider getting a resident at your institution. So someone like me who will basically work with your institution to channel the research and knowledge that you have onto Wikipedia and make it very fully accessible to everyone. So yeah, happy to discuss any of these options. If it's something that you are interested in, please do feel free to email me. I'd be really happy to assist you. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Tatiana. Thanks for the questions. There have been some coming in. I'm sorry, I'm all fingers and thumbs, and it was partly because of the size of my small screen. I managed to accidentally mark a couple of questions as done when they weren't. So I think you actually did answer Antonio's question as you were talking there, Tatiana, but he's asked, how easy to become a Wikipedia volunteer? I've seen pages I wanted to edit, but they were semi-protected, for instance, but that's just to do with the number of edits you've got, I think, isn't it? To edit semi-protected pages.
Yeah, so you'll need to have an account, which is very easy to create. And yeah, there are semi-protected things. So you sort of need to do a bit of practicing potentially. So if that's something you're interested in, I can also assist you. But yeah, you can do a little bit of editing beforehand. It's just a protection mechanism for that article. Yeah.
But I think it is an interesting area because I've seen sort of misinformation on social media. They're sort of saying, Wikipedia, they won't let you edit these pages, and that's not the case. It's just you can't edit them with an IP edit. So a lot of pages you can just edit without an account, can't you? But a semi-protected page that might be
Yeah.
subject to vandalism, you can't edit on that basis.
Exactly. Yeah. So you can edit Wikipedia as an IP address. Like the community, if you actually are serious about editing Wikipedia, I highly suggest that you create an account because the community always like will be a little suspicious of like random IP address edits rather than actual accounts. And then yeah, if you create an account and you just do a bit of practice editing, depending on the protection strength of that article. Some are, you need 500 edits and that's going to take a while. So yeah, these are just steps to actually like secure the knowledge to some extent, but anyone can still edit Wikipedia. I think it's just also a measure to show that people are actually devoted and dedicated to creating knowledge in the
And they're editing in good faith. They're not
exactly.
coming on to change something that they might have
Yeah.
done. You can see their account that they're established, etc. So hopefully that helps, Antonio. But yeah, we can work with you on that. There's a question here for you, Monica, from another colleague of mine from here at Leeds, Alexa. Thanks, Alexa. So she's asking, with respect to you were talking about the repositories, how can one track access to these repositories? I.e., is there a demand for this research? So obviously, paywalled research is one thing, open access research, but is there any evidence that people are then actually using this open access material, I guess, is the question.
Yeah, no, that's a great question. And I sort of want to answer it from like sort of two perspectives or two angles. The first is, a group like the Confederation on Open Access Repositories will keep track of access to that. So I will just put the link to them. But I want to give you an interesting use case that I think hopefully will make the case for why you want to move or take the time to put something into a repository. So if you allow me to share my screen again, and hopefully without issue this time. Okay, so this is a paper that I wrote during my PhD, and so it was on sort of the p-values in ecology research over time. And so it got published in Frontiers. It's has a high impact factor at the time. I was really excited about it. I can't access this article myself, even though it's my own paper. And if you want to, it's for myself, it's rather expensive for like a one-time sort of use. But what I've done is I leverage the Share Your Paper tool, and in combination with the Unpaywall extension, what it does is it gives you this little tab here on the right of my browser. And when it finds an open access version of the same, of the paywalled article, it will turn this icon green. And so I don't have access to the version of record, but Unpaywall found the open access version that I uploaded to Zenodo. And so now I can read my own paper, and anyone else who hits a paywall when they're trying to read this paper that I wrote, by leveraging the repository network, what the Unpaywall does is that it crawls, a number of repositories to link the author accepted manuscript that's in the repository to the version of record, and then lets you basically break down that paywall with this combination of authors uploading their manuscript and the Unpaywall tool as well.
Thanks, Monica. And then actually, so a related question to that, and there's another question about preprint servers as well. But first of all, this might clarify this for me as well. So a colleague, Jess, is asking, should we use the paper pledge that you mentioned, or is it a repository like the White Rose Research Online repository? So that's our repository here at Leeds. We have an open access repository called Rose. For sure.
Yeah, absolutely. So for the paper pledge, we were trying to, have a home for any researcher who, especially if you're not affiliated with an institution anymore. But I absolutely suggest that you use your institutional repository, because also if questions come up as you're uploading material, you're going to have a repository manager or a librarian who's going to be able to answer any question that might come up. and will happily guide you through the process of uploading your author accepted manuscript and give you information about sort of like what, what version and what license can be added to it.
I wasn't directly involved, but I vaguely recall, because obviously University of Leeds publishes a lot of climate research, and there was something going around about asking universities to make sure that their papers were open access. So there was a bit of a project not that long ago, I think.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, so we're still sort of trying to work our way through a list of. So we've got we sent universities a list of like papers that are no more than 5 years old, because I think there was a question here too about are researchers reluctant to share their research or openly license it. I have yet to actually encounter that. What happens sometimes though is that because you have to find the author accepted manuscript version, so that's usually like the Word version. If it's older than 5 years, it's harder to find the sort of like your working copy of that paper.
And just related to that question, I'll come back to you in a moment, Tatiana, but for Andy Noves, I hope I'm saying your name right, Andy. He's asking, are there any central repositories or preprint servers specifically for climate research? Because some of the researchers I work with complain about their institutional repositories being poor or non-existent.
Yeah, there's you can always use Zenodo is a sort of a generalist repository. I think any institutional repository will take, almost all of them will take any material, so it doesn't actually have to be associated with the institution. In terms of a preprint server, so for a preprint, different preprint servers have different rules about sort of what stage in the submission process they'll sort of consider it a preprint. So I would check that. There's a lot of information about that on ASAP Bio. I'll throw that link in the chat as well. But to answer your question specifically, there's like an ecology, like there's Eco Archive. So it's sort of like ecology related. So if you're specifically looking for a place to submit your preprint, so that's usually a manuscript that hasn't undergone the peer review process, Eco Archive is probably a good place for you to look at.
Yeah, and that is a good
I'll drop links to both.
That's a good question from our perspective as well, because I've been developing a list of preprint servers and that kind of thing. But I'd be interested potentially to discuss that with you in a bit more detail. Andy, some Wikipedia questions. Where was it? Well, there's another one from Andy, actually. So he's asking, are Wikipedia editors rewarded or recognised anywhere with badges or something on ORCID? That's perhaps one for you, Tatiana.
So I would say, so if you are a researcher and your work is cited on Wikipedia, that counts towards your altmetric scores. But obviously you're asking more about actually contributing as an editor. So this is actually something that I am sort of trying to do some advocacy work around in terms of academia, because I don't think that, researchers aren't rewarded enough at this point for their contributions to Wikipedia. And yet it's every grant you apply for, every piece of work you do, a question is always like, how are we going to communicate this beyond our academic circles? Like, what is the research communication output to the public around this, to policymakers, for example? And adding that information to Wikipedia is an excellent way to do that. It's also quite an accessible way to do it as well. So I think that there should be more recognition for researchers in academia that are editing Wikipedia. I would say that what is quite nice is that it's quite easy to show that you have contributed. So if you create an account, then you have your username and there's that edit history that I referred to earlier. And so you can always show the value that you've added, coupled with the number of page views that those Wikipedia articles are getting, because that's very easy to obtain from Wikipedia. So in a lot of ways, the platform actually is a great way that to like really supports demonstrating impact. So I think like funders as well should be thinking about this kind of thing. I've been speaking to some funding bodies around how they can drive it from like a top-down way as well. And I also was going to say that, oh, it's gone now. Um, it'll probably come back to me later.
Well, I mean, just to add from my perspective, our perspective at Leeds, Tatiana, I mean, it's not just an issue for editing Wikipedia, it's reward systems for open research more
Yeah.
generally, and it's a discussion we're having at Leeds and across the sector because
Yeah.
the reward system is predicated on things like journal impact factor and very traditional metrics that aren't necessarily the best metrics. So it's an area
Absolutely.
that, you know, it's to share a data set, for example, you're not explicitly rewarded for that. You might be expected to do it, but there's a lot of issues around the rewards
Yeah. Just
mechanism.
to add that, I remember what it was. I worked with a researcher who made some contributions to Wikipedia, and they included that in their case for promotion as well as part of their research communication outputs as well. So I think there's more change that needs to happen, but it can happen now. I mean, it's very easy to use Wikipedia's existing structures to demonstrate impact.
Yeah. And there was another question around that, so I think you've already answered that, just in terms of, you know, in the context of a research project, how can you demonstrate your impact of funders and managers? As you say, it's actually very easy to get quite sophisticated impact data from Wikipedia, I think, isn't it? In terms of page views and use of images and that kind of thing. I mean, just to say, it's something we're looking at Leeds as well. One of the things I'd like to do is to take openly licensed images and diagrams and, you know, everything from openly licensed research papers and put them on Wikimedia Commons where they're discoverable and they can be used to improve Wikipedia. For example, that's one project that we're looking at. There's just to come back to the open access question again, I'm conscious of time. We've got 5 minutes, but there was just a question there, Monica, perhaps for you, in terms of whether researchers might decline to share their papers open access in that way and what sort of reasons they might give for not sharing. Is that something you've encountered? Are people unwilling perhaps to share that unformatted version that you mentioned?
Yeah, so far, you know, I think it's more of a case of prioritization of, like, you know, this is like, to go back to the question of incentives and rewards, you know, this is something extra that they would be doing, you know, where there is no reward for making their work open, particularly like if you're sharing an author accepted manuscript. And so, you know, I have yet to encounter any researcher who has, you know, hesitancy to do it. It's just more like finding time to do it and finding that unformatted version, particularly if the research is older than 5 years.
Yeah, so with just a few minutes left, I mean, there's quite a few AI's popped up a few times in a few different contexts. So I don't know if you've got any quick thoughts on AI. I mean, there's one question around how emerging technologies such as AI enhance the accessibility and credibility of open science and climate research. Are there any new platforms or tools you're excited about that support open climate data sharing? Any thoughts on that immediately, or?
Yeah, 2 quick points. The first is, actually, we have been talking to, CC has been talking to Wikipedia to look at different types of sort of data providers that have robust data that may be peer reviewed or that is community reviewed, and looking at not only trying to have contributions to those types of platforms so that we can develop AI models that are robust and that can integrate attribution, because citation is very important, particularly to researchers. And we've also been looking at ways to indicate preference for how the data should be used by AI models. And the second piece that I want to just leave you with is that as you're thinking about, you know, how do the licenses intersect with AI, it's very clear that they don't, in the sense that AI is a fair use exception in most places in the world. And so even if you put a very restrictive license on your copyrighted work, with the intent of AI not scraping your work, that is actually sort of not, it does not apply to AI because it's under a copyright exception under fair use. So
yeah, well, that's
CC
we haven't
license.
time to discuss that, I don't in much detail today, but it came up in a session that Antonio and I were running last week. I think people are concerned now because of AI, but, you know, the CC BY license doesn't protect you, does it? Because they just chew up everything they find online, and there's obviously lots
right,
of
and neither will a very, very restrictive license.
yeah,
So
yeah.
use the
And
CC BY
also,
license so you can
even
tune
if
in.
it's behind a paywall and the publisher
That's
owns
right.
the copyright, very often they're making deals with the AI company. So it's,
That's right.
it's a developing area that's really difficult to sort of say. So there's one last question there. I'm not sure I totally understand it. Perhaps I'm not sure if either of you could share any thoughts on how Wikimedia challenged the tackle of growing analog community in the world of AI, ready to work to develop and grow entries in multiple languages on Wikipedia. How do you encourage engagement and collaboration in this area? As I say, I think let's talk about AI for translating between languages. Perhaps is that acceptable on Wiki?
Well, quite a multifaceted question there. Yeah, so I think that when ChatGPT dropped and a lot of large language models were becoming more and more prolific, I think the Wikimedia Foundation was quite concerned about what this would mean for the platform. So there's quite a scramble to sort of like figure it all out. And I think that so far they've found that it isn't necessarily as much of a threat at this point than they thought. I've kind of seen as well that with the growing AI use, there's also a growing appreciation of platforms that are human curated content. There's a growing acknowledgement of the importance of these platforms, which I think is really encouraging. And I mean, Wikipedia is still in the top 10 websites most visited at the moment. I think, obviously this can shift. Things are developing very fast. So I think obviously there's a need for Wikimedia to remain agile as they can. But yeah, I mean, the platform's been around for a number of decades now. In some ways, it's quite special in that regard, I think. Around multiple languages, so it is really interesting. There are many different, each kind of different language. Wikipedia has its own editing community. They kind of tend to organize themselves differently as well. There are sort of cross-translation efforts. I do some work around Spanish Wikipedia as well. I think in general, like Wikipedia the community is a little bit, it's still sort of always under discussion, but they are a bit like hesitant around using artificial intelligence necessarily to generate like knowledge to put onto Wikipedia. Especially as if it's just going full circle around the knowledge creation aspect. But yeah, there are actually tools that are built into Wikipedia to assist with automatic translation across articles. But the idea is that you would use this as a first language speaker and go through it. It's just as an aid, and then you would basically go and like check everything and that kind of thing. So yeah. Hope that addresses.
No, thanks, Tatiana. As I say, thanks to whoever asked that question. And there's lots to talk about. And obviously, we are at time. So I am conscious of time, and a few people have drifted away already. But I suppose there was an element of optimism there in what you were saying, Tatiana. I suppose I'll just give you the opportunity, Monica, to, I started at the beginning talking about that AI-generated paper that was sort of challenging the consensus on climate change. So are you optimistic or pessimistic? So I give you the last word to you. I'm hoping you're optimistic. You suggested you might be, so that was why I was coming to you.
Yeah, I am. I mean, I think that's it. Pessimism, I think, drives clicks, and we're not hearing from the voices around, the type of like transitions we are, moving towards in terms of like green infrastructure, green energy, all of that. An increasing number of our energy is coming from renewable resources. We are making progress. In these challenging times, we have to remember that there is still there's a lot of incentives to continue to make progress towards, finding solutions and mitigations. Like, we know the research is not really about whether climate change is real or not. It's about, understanding the impacts now, and also adaptations and mitigations and solutions. And, I think the majority of folks want to solve this problem.
No, thank you very much. Thank you to you both for coming along today and for staying over time, and for those that have stuck with us. I'm sure you've got other things to do. So thank you, Tatiana, and thank you, Monica. And I'm sure any colleagues online, you've already suggested, both of you, be very happy for people to get in touch. Ask any questions. Likewise, at Leeds, any colleagues from Leeds, some of the work we're doing around this with Tatiana, and hopefully in the future with Monica as well, you're very welcome to get in touch. And it's all about collaboration. So yeah, thank you very much, everybody, and see you again. Thank you.